It's Robert Gowan sitting here at 15 Perry Street with the sidekick.
Hey, it's Kyle. How are you guys?
So we've got a guest that was back here, and I'm trying to remember. It's Jeff Morris, by the way. I'm going to just go ahead and first say that. Jeff, thanks for coming.
Nah, great to be back.
And I'm trying to remember the number. I'm sure you remember.
The number I don't remember. It was August of 21.
Okay. Wow.
Early August.
All right. So year and a half.
280 or something around there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Probably something of that nature. Jeff wrote a book, Legion Rising, and if you haven't listened to the episode, go find Legion Rising. It has his name, Jeff Morris. If you look there, the whole thing's, I think in the title, that's what it's called, Legion Rising.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And congratulations, by the way, turned hard book or hardcover.
Yeah. It kind of went the opposite of how things normally go. Normally, book will come out, be published in hardcover, and then after X amount of time, it'll come back and go to paperback then. Back then was a guy that no one's ever heard of, so had a hard time getting a publisher, thought we had a good story, but, who the hell is this guy? So went the paperback route, and so fast forward 3.5 years later, I'm still a guy that no one has any idea who the hell that guy is.
That's not true.
But my co-writer, Lauren, so if you go to the original copy that you had, back then it had Elsie Mickler, and that was her first book, and since then, her career has really taken off, and she's got some really cool projects. Not only have published some really cool projects, a few of them were true ghostwriting, so like strict NDAs. You can't say who they were, but they've done very well. But now her career has progressed to a point where her name is first and foremost, kind of in the title. Her most recent one it's called Flying the Tyrant. And it's the story of
Saddam Hussein's pilot.
Yeah.
And actually, we're looking at arranging him to come on our podcast. So be on the lookout for that if you're listening to this,
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, exactly. She reached out to me and said, hey, I don't know if this is of interest and everything, but it's like, this is definitely of interest.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I may or may not have told her to reach out.
Okay. Good.
Neither confirmed nor denied. But yeah, so again, and since then, she's gotten remarried, new last name. And so it kind of started with the publisher of, hey, can we go and update, the old version? It still had me living in Texas. I live in Indiana now. She got a new name and like, hey, can we do that? And like, hey, her career is going really well. So I sent the publisher some of her details. And like the next day they were like, hey, the book's done so well for us. We want to go ahead and put it out in hardcover. So yeah, pretty exciting. I mean, there's no new content in the book, but just, I don't know. It's just something more tangible, more real almost, having that hardcover version. So it doesn't mean anything. Maybe it means something special to Lauren and I.
Yeah. No, I think it does mean something.
Then it means everything at that point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have something that you can put on a library shelf if you have a library at your house or a bookshelf at your house that is, that's the kind of stuff you're going to keep. You're not keeping the
smoking cigar and a jacket.
You got a lot of
room.
leather, a lot of mahogany in the room. You know what I mean?
But no, that's very cool, man. I'm happy for you. And I know that since this time frame, since you came on the podcast, you've been doing all kinds of crazy things, like you were talking about traveling all over, guest speaking, those types of things. It's really been, I think, pretty good for you. I mean, you're getting your message out there, which is what's most important.
Yeah, it's part of the travel has been work. And last year, I started getting this. It started with the CrossFit workout, if you remember, and I was speaking, but I was telling somebody else's story. I was talking about the men and what Legion 8 was about. And then from that ultimately led to the book. And then more people like, hey, can you take a lot of what you talked about in the book, maybe inadvertently were leadership lessons, how to handle adversity, all things that can translate to, the corporate world. And so a few years ago, I got hooked up. I think it was actually right after I was on I think I listened to it driving down there for one of my first speeches to a business. And so, take the message, a lot of what we talked about, but apply the lessons and and being in the corporate America myself, I can take certain examples from the book, the message of what we speak about, and find a way to tie those into how it can apply to someone who's never served, but, they hold an executive position in a company, whatever it may be, or it doesn't have to be an executive, anybody in a company, a leadership challenge, dealing with people of diverse backgrounds, when to stop, kind of take a tactical pause and realize that, you don't have to have all the answers right away, but sometimes you do have to act decisively and, the old thing, sometimes violence of action can overcome a lot of mistakes. Sometimes that applies, and sometimes it doesn't. So, so it's been good. And, it grew. It was kind of had to slow it down a little bit. My wife travels for work. I mentioned to you beforehand, we had a stretch of about 6 months, last year where we were both home outside of a vacation we took. There was only 2 weeks. We were both home, and with 3 young kids, just kind of said, you know what, work's keeping me busy enough. Let's maybe back off the speaking, get into the new year, and hopefully get back at it, back after it soon.
Yeah, man. I tell you what, I'm glad that you came back on. It's been a while, and we've stayed in touch and stuff, through the time frame. And one of the places that you spoke or gave a speech on was an organization that in the construction business, the depression is really high.
Yeah.
And you may see the same thing in Kyle's in that line of business. And and I think it was the feedback that I got was tremendous of what you left in terms of a message about dealing with the demons in your life and depression and those types of things. And so I think you're doing amazing things out there. And man, I'm just loving watching you blaze the trail,
We're trying, and thank you again for that introduction.
Yeah,
It
no worries.
It's an interesting tie-in. So just a little backstory is, and you just touched on a lot, the company that I got associated with, it was really more of an association, was in the construction industry. And then from that led to, your connection. So there was just a pretty unique tie-in, which is hopefully going to lead to some other opportunities with that separate organization that you got me involved with. So
yeah,
thank you for that.
Yeah, no worries. So what we wanted to talk about, I think more this time around was we got a little deep the last time. Obviously, the book is that way. It's an amazing book. Again, I can't state it enough. I actually read it. You're from Destin, and I actually was sitting on the beach down there in the Panhandle and was setting out. I wasn't in the sun because I'm not much of a person that can get much of a tan or anything, but I was sitting underneath the umbrella and reading your book, and I think I read it in that one seating, probably about a 2-hour read, 3-hour read or something. And I get done and just emotionally spent, and my eyes were red. My wife looked at me and she goes, how was it? And I go, it was probably by far the best book I've ever read. And I wholeheartely mean that. It was an amazing book.
Thank you.
So definitely encourage everybody to go out and get it. So, but there was some stories and things that, in your life that kind of happened that we don't always get a chance to talk about always when you write a book or something like that. We focus on the story and the back and all of that. But there are always things that just happen in life in general, and never get told about. And I mean, you shared some stories of some things that maybe might be a little bit different or unique than the average soldier gets to experience. I don't know. Is the whole thing with having your wife come in and those types of things normal? And what you were talking about?
Yeah. And kind of to touch on a little bit more, I mean, you're right. It was, and again, I love talking about it and I love sharing these things, but it is, the opportunity a lot about the book. It's heavy content. It's hard. I'm like, God, I feel like sometimes, people come up, they're like, oh, I cried when I read the book. I was crying during your speech. I'm like, dude, I like to laugh, right? Have a good time.
I'm still a bro.
We can still hang out, and have a good time. So, that's what when we were texting the other night, I was like, yeah, I mean, there's stuff that didn't make the book. There's other things outside of that. And I mean, there's some other heavier, serious content that we.
Well, you were covering some stuff, and I was honestly cracking up when you were sending it to me, like,
we were sitting in that meeting just across from each other reading the stuff, and I was like, yeah, that'd be great to talk about.
So that's what I was like, can we maybe laugh instead of not cry? Like,
right.
Last time. But no, the one you're talking about, it's just always one. Like, people ask me, they're like, outside of the combat stuff, and everything that goes on, like, is there anything that just seemed like that you'll just like never forget? Like just something different. It can be funny, serious, and I was like, one of the most surreal things outside of all that crazy crap that we went through was me and my first sergeant and the company commander and the first sergeant for our support company. One of my soldiers was married to one of their soldiers, and they had a deal set up where they could have one conjugal visit a week or 2 weeks, whatever it was. And so whenever that happened, I mean, you're in that world and boys will be boys. Like, we would literally have to clear the barracks out, and the 4 senior leaders of the two companies would sit and basically pull security on this hallway.
No way.
Nice. That is leadership at its finest.
Yes, but we had to stay far enough. They had to have privacy, and so we would sit there and we set it up. Sitting around smoking cigars and just like, how weird is this? We're just sitting around a bunch of dudes, rockets. Sometimes you can hear them. Not coming into our base at the time because that would have halted everything going on, but. You seeing tracers going up in the air, and here we are. It could have been like back here in the States, but when your buddy's in there doing his thing with his girl. But no, it was our soldiers. And so for whatever reason, that just always sticks out to me as like one of the most surreal, combat, leadership responsibilities I had was pulling security so my boy could get laid.
That's fantastic. That is fantastic.
I don't know that if somebody can trump that, you're going to have to let us know, because I don't know that you can.
Yeah, pictures or it didn't happen, by the way. So.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Do you have any photos of you guys sitting out there on the steps and smoking cigars?
Yeah, no, we did take it. I mean, yes, there were a lot of jokes.
Yeah.
We're boys too, but but no, we did take it really seriously, and we'd go out and make sure nobody was trying to peek in the room. And,
absolutely.
So we took it as seriously as the situation dictated. let me rephrase that.
That is bizarre, but never in terms of visits with anything else. I mean, it was more of just this is a spouse, two spouses happen to be exactly. Just to clarify.
Yes. It was no other.
So were both spouses on the same fob, or were you guys like on a cop and then you guys came to a fob?
Same fob Rustamaya.
Oh,
yeah, same.
Wow.
Yeah, and apparently there were other cases like that too. Now my first deployment, much smaller. There was a couple on there, but I didn't have anything to, lowly lieutenant, and so. But this was a much bigger fob Rustamaya. It's 10 times bigger than fob Independence was. So they had all kind of units there, and I guess it was the normal. It was new to me, but apparently it's not normal, and people are like, oh yeah, this is what happens all the time. Yeah, so I mean, it was just crazy, and again, it's just the funny stuff you don't think about. We had to move one day, so we got there, and Rustamaya was one of the most heavily rocketed fobs in all of Baghdad. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, when we get there, there's an overflow of people, soldiers on the fob. So they had these old metal buildings that they put us in. They're like, well, hopefully some other people, once they clear out, will be able to put you in a concrete building. So anyhow, we're in these metal buildings, and sure enough, one gets a rocket through it one night. Fortunately, none of our soldiers, they were out on patrol. So they made room. They got us down to but I mean, you talk about, 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. I mean, it was just crammed. I mean, 6 dudes in a room, not much bigger than this. And, you walk over there, you check on the guys. And I walk in one day, and this one dude, I was like, hey, where's, I'm not going to say his name. I'm like, where's he at? And they're like, oh, he's in there. You just can't see him. And he had it covered up and draped over. And I'm like, what are you doing in there? And then he's like, hold on, sir, give me 1 second.
Don't open that drape.
Exactly. You know what he's doing. You know exactly what he's doing. And he was like, hold on, sir, give me a few more minutes. And then he's like, all right, I'm done. So he flips it open, and I'm like, and I know what he's doing. I'm just like, he's like, hey, sir, check out my setup in here. And I'm like, what? So I mean, again, these are like tiny bunk beds. And I look in there, and he had gone and bought mirrors from little local shops that we get on the fobs, and he covered across the top and on the side, and he's like, I call it the Jack Shack.
What the hell?
Oh, God.
Any of my guys that are listening, they know exactly who it is. But,
that's what happens when you give people expendable income in foreign countries. They buy a bunch of mirrors for their bunk to have a yak shack.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are some of the funny things. And then there's other stuff. I mean, I text you some. So,
yeah, one of the things that you had talked about was, what was it, Bush? Was it Bush Jr. or younger?
Yeah.
So what was the story there?
So it was, this was 2018. Yeah, 2018. You kind of got to back up a little bit. So a lot of, I'd started the Legion 8 stuff in 2012, but I was kind of just coming out of, my dark time. And so it was probably around 2015, 16 when I was still not doing stuff about me. It was all about the men. And it's when I moved over to DFW from Tyler. I'd been there a few years, but I switched CrossFit gyms, and I met this guy in there, and the gym is the ultimate equalizer. He's just this dude in the gym, and as it turns out, he's just he's an incredibly successful, also humble mentor, friend, just true salt of the earth, as good as people can come. And so he was really instrumental in getting Legion 8 as a nonprofit, introducing me to a lot of business leaders in DFW, and kind of help get the story about the men out to them to help Legion 8 grow. But he also just took a very vested interest in me personally and wanted to do things to help my career and kind of get me and my story out there. And so one day he sends me this text, and he's like, hey, you and Ann, my wife, he's like, you and Ann want to go to dinner with President Bush. And it's like, you don't need me to answer that question. And he's like, yeah, so it's a smaller group of people, but he does this every couple of years. And, I won't get into all how it's all connected. But the Cliff Notes is, so we end up at this house in Dallas, which is, like every year they list like the 100 most expensive homes in Dallas. And this one's near the top every year. In the top, call it 25%. And you kind of look around who's all at the meeting, and Ann and I made a joke. We're like, do you realize how us being here, how much we have lowered the per capita income
in the room and in the area?
You're the outlier that would need to get removed.
Yes. I mean, this house has a museum in it. And when I say museum, it's like a whole floor that is just artifacts from around the world, stuff that he donates to, Smithsonian, very high-end museums around the country. And so we're up there walking around the museum, and, one name I will mention is, just looking around at stuff, and I kind of, oh, hey, Mr. Perot, my name's Jeff Morris. Nice to meet you. It was Ross Perot before he passed. So it kind of gives you an idea of the crowd and how, one of these things, Ann and I, is not like the other. Like, we don't fit in. But so it was cool. So, like, Bush comes in, and, he comes in, and everybody gets to get a picture with him. And the whole dinner was called a fireside chat with President Bush. And so they usher him in, and everybody lines up, and you go in. It's like a factory. You go in, hi, I'm so-and-so. Hi, I'm so-and-so. Smile. Boom, get out. And so we walk in, and Ann walks in first, and she introduced herself. And then I come in, and I'm just like, hey, sir, I just want to say it's an honor to meet my commander-in-chief, when I was on active duty. And he's like, oh, really? He's like, what, when were you in? And I told him, he's like, what'd you do? And I was like, Army. And he's like, you deploy and where? And I told him, and he was like, so you jacked up in the head? Just kind of like laughing, saying it. And because I told him I was an Army grunt. And
yeah.
So smile, take picture, that's it. And then we walk off. So we go, and they do this incredible, Ari Fleischer, his former press secretary, kind of narrated it. And they sit up. The house has an amphitheater in it too, a small amphitheater. And so Bush and Ari Fleischer are up there, and it's just pros, man. Just the dialogue, teeing them up for questions. And it's very understood. Like, there's no cell phones out in this. Some of the stuff they talk about, don't go share on Facebook with your friends. It's, again, with that crowd outside of Ann and I, it's kind of an understood thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was just, I tell everybody, it was the most captivated I've ever seen a group of people for an hour and 10 minutes in my life, including ourselves. I mean, it was just all these really incredible stories, funny, really, really funny stuff. And then with about 20 minutes to go, Ari's like, so now let's talk about your most difficult day ever as a president. And September 11th. So he takes 20 minutes and just tells you about that day through his eyes, stuff you don't hear about. So yeah, it was awesome. So you get done, you go have dinner. And my friend had set it up with the guy's house we were at. They were trying to organize like a 5-minute one-on-one time with he and I, just to tell him a little bit about Legion 8, not to, blurb or anything, just to make that connection. And then he was running late, and anyhow, the other guy came over. He's like, hey, the private thing's not going to work. He's like, but before he leaves, I'll let you know, let's get Jeff down at the end of the hallway. And so 10 minutes later, get a tap on the shoulder, and I got a Legion 8 shirt that I've had like tucked on the inside of my jacket all night. And so I go down to the end of the hallway, and it's a Secret Service guy on one end and a Secret Service guy on the other end. And they said he was going to skip dessert, but I guess he didn't. So I'm just standing in this hallway for like 10 more minutes. And finally I'm like, hey, y'all saw so-and-so said I can come down here, right? These guys kept eyeing me, and they're like, no, you're cool. So when it happened, so he comes down the hallway, and his aide had walked over and met me, wanted to know what we were going to talk about so he could prep him a little bit. He said he doesn't like surprises. And so his aide's whispering in his ear while he walks down to me and comes up, and I was just like, Mr. President, said, my name's Jeff. We met earlier. He was like, yes, we did, Jeff. You were in the Army, you did 2 deployments, and you're not jacked up in the head. And just kind of laughed. And I said, yes, sir. And I said, well, one of the things I want to talk about is, during one of those deployments, I lost 8 men under my command, which means that you lost 8 men under your command. And I didn't tell a lot of people about this, that I may have this opportunity. But one of the men that I lost, I'm incredibly close with his mother. And so I let her know, and I said, if I get this, is there anything that you want me to say to him? And I said, so instead of me telling it to you, I think it'd be more powerful just to let you read what she wrote. And so I'm going to have these pictures of me like holding my cell phone up, standing next to Bush. And so he reads it and just stares at the phone for a little bit. And then he just kind of looks up at me, and maybe it was allergies, I don't know, but he had tears in his eyes. Like his eyes were red and they were wet. And he just said, well, what's her name? And I told him, and he said, well, you go back and I always tell people I don't share what she wrote and I won't share what he said. He's like, but you go back and tell Linda that Laura and I said this and express that. And then I was just like, you know, while I got you, I might as well ask. And I was like, one of the things we do with Legion Aid is, you know, like so many other people, everyone, they always say, I don't want my boy's name, you know, or my girl's name to be forgotten. And I was like, so on all the Legion 8 shirts we put the boys' names on them. So I don't have to be in the picture. I won't post it if you don't want me to. I'll just share it with the families. But I just think it would mean the world for them to see that you have one of our shirts with their boy's name on it. And he was just like, hell no, boy, you get here in the picture with me. So we took a couple of pictures and did that. And then we turned, he just looked at me and he just shook his head. Then he put his, you know, hand up on my shoulder. And I kid you not, he punched me pretty hard. He just like punched me in the shoulder. Then he leaned over and whispered something in my ear that was, you know, pretty cool. And then he turned and walked out. And so then it's just weird thing. So like at this point, everybody in the dinner room, you know, it's like kids are like, you know, peeking around the corner to see what's going on. And they see me and him talking because everybody had left a lot of space. And so then it's like, all right, what do I do now? You know, I'm like looking around, trying to figure out what's next. And so yeah, then his aide came back in after that and just said, you know, hey, I don't know what you said to him, but, you know, he asked for a minute outside. He's like, so I got a feeling you'll probably be hearing from him again. So can I get your contact info? And yeah, like about 2 weeks later, we got a really cool letter and a picture of me, him, and Ann.
Wow, really?
Yeah, so
That's
it's
awesome.
really nice words on it. Yeah, so and we laugh. We're like and I'm not going to get into politics. I always say like whatever side you're on, like that was a cool moment. It's not that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but the running joke behind it was our mailman must have been a non-Republican, let's just call it that, because when the thing came in the mail, it's like huge, you know, from the office of the President of the United States, do not bend. And the thing was like rolled up, but we were able to get it flat. You know, we got it all worked out. So, but it was kind of a joke. We're like, well, our mailman probably doesn't like us now. He's going to hide all the mail.
That's screwed up though. But
yeah.
a lot of people probably don't even know, or maybe they do, but you know, who is Ross Perot? So I just happened to work with somebody who was his chief of staff, and she now is a good friend. She lives out in Texas still, in the Dallas area, and a couple of people that used to work for Perot. But Ross actually, I came in the military a long time ago, and I won't say when, but let's just say that there was the Iran hostage crisis and everything that took place, and you know, Ross went out, got a bunch of volunteers, guys that worked with him and everything, got a private plane and went in and got them out. And, you know, I mean, that dude was like serious military supporter. Not just that, but, you know, proud American. Of course, he ran for president. Everybody made fun of him because of the way he talked and the way he looked. And, you know, the press is terrible when it comes to that, the cartoons and the whole bit. But a really cool dude, too, that you got a chance to meet while he was still living.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very brief encounter, but ironically, and we'll have to swap names later. I said that guy introduced me to a lot of business leaders, and one of them was one of his old chief of staff. So this is probably back in 2015.
Female?
No, we had lunch together. And
no, I said female.
No, it's male.
Okay, no, this was a female chief of
Yeah,
staff.
yeah. So as soon as you said that, I realized it's got to be a different one. But
and I screwed up in the very beginning. I gave the name of your book wrong. I said Legion Rising. It's Legion 8 Rising, right?
No, it's Legion Rising.
Okay, I couldn't remember. When you said Legion 8, I thought, wait, did I forget that?
No. But it's really funny you say that because, like, Lauren is an incredible writer.
Yeah.
You know, like, all right, I can talk and tell stories, and I'd come back and I'd correct a few things. But, like, we had the hardest time with the title. And, you know, we'd get advice. And because when we were doing it, this was when Legion 8, the CrossFit nonprofit, was really getting bigger, and like you should kind of capitalize on that. And 2-1, like a lot of people forget this. I was only Legion 1 deployment. I had a whole other deployment where a whole hell of a lot of other stuff happened, which we actually spent more time in the book telling probably more specific combat details of that deployment. It seems like with the second one with Legion, we kind of just all right, this happens, things turn to crap, and here's the aftermath. So I really wanted to Legion, because that's ultimately sort of what my experience is symbolized. Like, again, we're all Legion, we all rise together. But we had such a hard time with the book. And she actually came to me with that one, and I didn't like it. Like, she had to talk me into it. And finally, after probably a month of debate, and now I have the time, everybody's, I love the title. The title's perfect. How she tied it all in. And I'm like, yeah, of course, I almost screwed it up. But, I had these other wild. And
I was going to say, what was the other titles?
Give us the working titles.
Yeah, it was this, and I'm not trying to avoid the question. Like, I honestly never came up with something that I really thought was good. Like, I would, there's a lot of stuff about the only one that ever, I tell the whole story about the mirror and, cut myself open. And then I talk a lot about shadows and how that was just sort of my analogy for, I had these shadows that just had this control over me. And so I had this idea of like, my shadow in the mirror.
Gotcha.
Something that came up. That was how I always envisioned it, and then finally, after having this idea in my head for a year to, do a book, I'm like, oh, I should Google and see if someone else has that name. And yeah, it was like some romance novel or something. Like,
that's so funny because there are a lot of people out there that think they come up with a brilliant idea. Hey, I got this great idea and everything. And what you realize is if you Google it nowadays, especially, you're going to probably find that somebody's
already a website.
And it's trademarked or copyrighted and the whole deal. So no, I think the title is amazing. And I didn't really focus on the title. Obviously, I found out about you and I bought the book and I got into it. And but when I got done with it, I thought that is a brilliant title, and I actually did think that. I thought, what a great tie-in and a great way of recognizing your unit. And I thought there actually was a tie-in to the unit name, that's a motto, or you know what I mean. It's sort of like
it was that was our unit name, was Legion, the second deployment.
Yeah,
but it was, and again, without getting all of the details, it was the first deployment. What ended up being Legion was Charlie Company 19, Crazy Wolf.
Yeah.
And I was with Alpha Company 19, the Annihilators. And again, a lot of stuff happened that deployment on Haifa Street. It's when we came back that I went over to be the XO of Charlie Company. Now, again, we knew those guys. We were on the same fob, worked together every day. So it was like going into an extended family. But the group that I deployed with that second time, when we had to change our name with the reorg, that's when Crazy Wolf became Legion.
Gotcha.
And Annihilators, that Alpha Company went to Fort Bliss. So that's why there's a little bit of separation there.
Are any of those units still in existence today? Because, sometimes they fold up the colors, but.
I know I got a thing a year or two back where the Bravo 18, they wanted to change the name to Legion, and of course some people raised the stunk and like, hey Jeff, you should call and make sure, remind them those guys' pictures are still on the wall in there. And I'm like,
I was gonna say, your mug needs to be on the wall with the book and the whole thing. I mean, like,
no. But it was, and I get where some of the guys, that legacy needs to stay on. But to me, it's like, a name is a name. It's the experience. It's the men. It's the camaraderie. It's the laugh, the cry. Like, a name change is never going to change anything that we experienced or what we have to draw from moving forward.
Yeah. What were some of the zaniest, or outside of the ones you already shared, what were some of the zaniest or craziest things in terms of being a leader that you saw out there? And it could have just been, it could have been more of a leadership experience as opposed to, something like what you described that's just more of a funny story. But do you remember anything that comes out?
Yeah, I mean, and this is probably more on the serious side.
Yeah.
Again, second deployment, we were in like the most heavily IED'd area in Baghdad at the time, and probably all of Iraq, and where we were, our patrol base, this is back during the surge, where lead the creature comforts with the big fob. So we were the furthest removed of all the units. So we were kind of, out where no one had been since, 04, early 05. In this area, right outside Sadr City, we called it the SUJ. It was like Shara Jadir, I forget. But if you take that road and go up a little bit further, that's where allegedly all the EFPs were made. Like, the Iranians had a big presence up there, and that was sort of the the main thoroughfare to get the equipment needed for the pressing with the copper plates, and it all tracked through our sector. And we didn't have any problems at first, and then we covered some of this last time, but it was when we started going out towards, the locals told us avoid that area, but of course we had to go check it out. So we were getting, we talk about the sad story where the men were killed, but like, so it wasn't just, those weren't singular events. Like we had Bradley after Bradley. So I had, 15 Bradleys. Now I had one platoon detached. So 11 Bradleys assigned to me across a couple of platoons. And then it was so bad up there, we were part of a combined arms battalion. So they gave me a tank platoon. So I had 5 M1s. They always had an extra on standby. Yeah. We'll get into main gun. That's another serious funny one. But I mean, so it was over the course of that spring, we had, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I came in one day. The short version is we had every Bradley coded. Like we had a stretch where we had no mechanized. We were a mechanized infantry company with no mechanized vehicles to take out on patrol.
Damn.
That doesn't mean everyone burned to the ground. About half of them did.
Not that all of them were catastrophic, but you had some that may have been zapped, some that may have been,
Yeah, they figured out if they come at this angle, like once it compromises the core, the whole of the Bradley, they got to code it. So then you got to wait and get another one in.
Yeah.
3 of the 5 M1s, I believe, were coded as well. Not from penetrating the unpenetrable armor, but again from going up into the hull of the vehicle. So, I mean, and during that time, you lose 6 guys in one event. You lose the 7th a little bit a couple of weeks later. After that, the 8th guy, he was actually in one of our platoons that was detached to another company. But just from a morale standpoint, I mean, people are like, how do you do it? I'm like, you don't try to do it. You can't polish a turd. Like, you can't go in and like try to sugarcoat this thing. And so I think, and the senior NCOs I had were incredible, and it was all very like-minded. We didn't have a whole lot of like rah-rah guys. We were all kind of on the same page of, we're going to shoot you straight. And yes, this sucks right now. This sucks like nothing we've ever been through before, but we still have a job to do. And we know that job's going to be hard, but, complaining and we'll probably touch someone later because I mentioned it to you about just the power of positive mindset. You can't make a positive out of that situation, but you can not let that situation drag you into a darker hole, which then could potentially take, second, third order effects. You capture somebody, there's detainee abuse. We were very, very, very cognizant of whenever we had someone, and again, not me, this is my NCOs, like stepping in. They were as pissed off as any other, Joe and wanted payback, but they would not let anything like that happen. So I think the takeaway, and it's one of the things I talk about in business, is like sometimes through the toughest times, and I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said before, that experience gave all of us a skill set that we can apply to other areas of our life, parenting, relationship, business, whatever it may be, to draw from that. And while it's not apples to apples, the experiences from it are.
Yeah, restraint, calmness in adversity or challenges and stuff.
Yeah.
And those types of things are real. I mean, like you said, out here in the private sector, you're going to go against very similar situations, and it may not be life and death per se, but it could be your family's income and your ability to survive going forward because you lose employment, or you cause other people to lose their job or anything, along that line. But
well, there's other second and third order effects to that too. So you had junior soldiers that were there that saw how mad that section leader or team leader might have been, but he still held restraint.
Yep.
So they can lean on that experience, knowing we just lost 6 guys. We had every reason to curb stomp this dude in a tent, let everybody get a lick in, and then turn him over. Yeah. But we didn't. We did the right thing. Yep. Even though it sucked for us, we still did the right thing.
Yep.
And that's somebody as a PFC that kind of saw some right and wrong when I was deployed. It was way easier for me to attach myself to the right than to see the wrong and continue to go with that.
Yeah, no doubt. And, unfortunately, and again, without getting into details, names or names, a situation like that did happen, which was kind of ties into the serious, but we're going to make it funny. That did happen with a different company after they lost a guy. And there was someone that we'll just say I was close with who had been a part of our unit, who is now a part of that unit in a different position, and kind of like walked in and saw it going on and didn't stop it immediately, ultimately stopped it, but and they would tell you, they just froze. They didn't know what to do. So anyhow, like everything, people want scapegoats, and his name and another name were brought up and had to get, they had to call it charges brought up against them. And so I was asked to go speak on this one guy's behalf at this panel, and it's like a 1-star, it's the assistant division commander, a 1-star, and then 2 06s, I think.
What is that, a 15-6? It's 15-6 investigation?
Yeah. Like I'm kind of trying to be vague here. Just, some people don't have fond memories about that experience at all. And so we get in, and I had my little spiel prepared. And at this point, because of this was post all the men dying and, in my unit. And so I don't want to say like all these people, they did know who I was because they had been at the memorials and they had come and talked to me, and, we had other, so I wasn't new, and they were like my best friend and biggest supporter during all that. But when this came up, it was such a hot topic. So, my buddy said his stuff. I went in, said my piece, and I thought I did pretty good. I was like, all right, I nailed it. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm standing there, all locked up, and assistant division commander looks at me. He's like, Captain Morris. Yes, sir. He was like, with all you've been through this deployment, does it make you feel worse that knows now you have to get out knowing that you helped raise abusive officers?
Yeah. What the fuck?
Talk about heavy and bullshit. I mean, what?
And it was a shitty thing to say. And again, not saying names, but we actually walked out and we both looked at each other, me and my buddy, and like cracked up laughing. I'm like, well, I can add that to the resume now when I get out here to class, right. Add that up. And then fast forward, 7 years, that same person was now a higher and was on, and I forget the context behind it. I just know I was sitting there one night. He was on, I think it was 60 Minutes or some other show, and they were interviewing him, and then I get this text from my buddy, and it was funny because I was doing the exact same thing, and we had both paused the TV, and we were both giving him the bird, sitting at each other at the same time. So
oh, I thought you were going to talk about karma came back in some other way to it.
No.
I mean, that was just disgusting. But you did have somewhere during that story, tell us about the M1 experience that you got to have.
Yeah. So you brought up tanks.
Yeah.
So when this tank platoon gets assigned to me, and again, we knew these guys. We had done cross-training exercises before. Freaking hilarious. One of the section leaders I forget exactly how they're called, but
section leaders
in the tank. Yeah. And I know it was in Bradley's. They were like that. This dude was hilarious. Like in one of the the first time we ever did a cross-training event with him, he went and bought a blow-up porn goat and hit it in one of the building, where Op 4 was supposed to be.
How do you even find those things?
Hey.
What? Porn goat?
As people are Googling right now.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, so then he attached a radio to it, and so when other groups, so we were playing Op 4, when people would walk by, he would start talking into it, bye, making the good sound, and then people would walk in there and see what it is, and they see it's this sex toy. I mean, so that gives you an idea. Just awesome dude. So they come over, and I'm like, all right, they're going to be a part of the unit, guys. I want to ride with you, and the last thing I ever want to do is be in the way. So where do you put? And sorry for all you loaders out there, but I'm like, where do you put the person with the least responsibility where they can't screw anything up? And every one of them is the loader seat. So I'm like, all right, put me in the loader seat. So we're in there one day, and I'm like, look, we know it's a big no-no to fire a main gun round in Baghdad. You got to get approval. At this time it was, at least. So I'm like, in the off chance we ever get in that situation again, I don't want to be a deterrent. So it can't be that hard. So teach me how to load a main gun round. And, so they got the thing in front, but they all rip them off, of course. And he's like, you reach in here, you do it, you got this. And I just remember he's like, you slam it home, and he's just like, and then think then. That's all I want you to remember, sir, is think then. And so fast forward a month or so, we're driving down Route Silver's coming up, and I'm with the tank platoon that day. And I mean, just a mammoth EFP. And this was kind of in the middle of, we'd lost the guys, and, we're still losing other vehicles. The infantry guys can't even necessarily go out in Bradleys. All they have is Humvees. And they hit the tank in front of us. I mean, it was so powerful. Like, it was probably 100 meters. And this will resonate with a lot of the listeners, who have experienced that. You have cracks, and like it literally sucked the air out of the tank that I was in, the one that was hit 100 meters in front of us. Like, it just blew the whole, the guys were fine. I mean, they were concussed, but the track was all blown off. The dust, I just remember seeing the dust get sucked out as well. It was crazy. And so then the infantry guys come out to start doing setup security. Then we start getting pop shots. And so it's not some coordinated ambush or anything, but there are people from all directions shooting at our guys on the ground. And, they have to get exposed in the open to, again, recover this thing. And so in just one of those, like, I'll face the consequences later. Like, we knew the area enough and where we were positioned. Like, and me and the section, we're sitting there talking about it. Starting to like, hey, if we put a main gun round through that, we know that building's empty. We know there's nothing there. We know there's nothing behind it except miles of fields. Like, I know we're not in the business of sending a message, but like, we have to do something to show them and ourselves that we're not just going to sit here and drive around and get blown up all the time. He was just like, sir, I want to do it. It's like, your call. He's like, don't you got to get, and I was just like, probably, but
however, I've been wanting to do this job of a loader. And
however, and there was a justification. Like, we have men on the ground in a dangerous situation. I was just like, do it. And this dude is freaking awesome. He just looked at me and just like smiled and goes, load that motherfucker, sir. So I reached in there and then it's like everybody's getting pumped up.
So what'd you index, AP or HE?
HE.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And,
all right. So did you go through the whole steps? You hit your knee, pull the door goes open, you grab a round from the honeycomb, you slam the round in.
First, I tell everybody,
pull the arm back.
I like get on our company net and like, hey, we're about to do this. And again, we're firing away from our. It's nowhere near them firing. It's totally just to, like, we're going to fight back.
It's a show of force.
That's all it is. Yeah. Which we're not supposed to do. Yep. And so then I was just like, all right, and then just grabbed it, and he was just like, slam it home, sir. So I did, and I just remember, I always laugh so hard because he said, sir, do you want to fire? And I was like, no, man, you train your whole career for this. So you pick somebody else is.
It's just a trigger, though, Jeff. You should have jumped up there in the TC and just pulled the trigger.
This guy's he's a tanker, man. You want to fire one of those things and say, you can tell their kids, like, I can tell mine, I loaded one in combat. He gets to say that he fired one. So he just said, think then, sir, think then. And then the thing went, blew it up. And, no one was shooting after that. And it was just, and again, it sounds so silly after all the crap we had been through. But like, the guys were so fired up. Like, once we got it recovered and we rolled back into the base, like, Sergeant Wolf was like, Patton rolling in his tank, like he just comes rolling up with his, and like all the guys are cheering him on. And they come over and they got the casing from it. And then they just walked over and like did this presentation. And they were just like, Legion 6, you were forever known as Red 2 Lima. And they gave it to me. And as a proud infantryman, I always tell everybody, like, the most adrenaline, just pump moment of my career was being in that tank when that main went. Holy shit, that was awesome.
Yeah. 2 miles down the range there is some heat round laying in the sand where it ran in, slowed down because it couldn't travel any further.
Well, you ended up as an IED later against
us. Right, somebody goes driving by and go, what the hell is that thing doing there?
So it was just, again, it was, I'm not saying that changed things, but like one area, and we talked to some before, I think, my boss and I butted heads a bit. But like, you can't hide that sound. So when that goes off, then you start getting like the other patrol bases close by. Hey, was that a IED? Is somebody in contact? What's going on? So I figured word was going to get out, and
it did.
Well, and I also knew I was coming up on changing command anyway. So I'm like, well, if I'm going to get fired, might as well get fired a month
for
before.
Being awesome. Yeah,
exactly.
So I went back to the file one day, and I just went into his office, and I just said, sir, can I talk to you? And he said, he's like, yeah, what's up? And I was like, sir, let's just kind of get I'm sure you probably know, and I didn't ask, but if you don't know, if no one said anything, I was like, I authorized, a main gun round being fired, and I know what a big deal that can be, and it has to get the approvals that I didn't get, but I felt the situation on the ground, and he cut me off. He was like, Jeff, yeah, I know you did. It's been handled.
Nice.
And I was like, all right.
Nice.
I figured he was probably going to say, Jeff, don't say anything more. I don't want to know. Just get the hell out of my office right now.
That sounds like what he was doing, but it was it sounds like a mission-oriented kind of guy, though. Like, it was needed. Necessary evil kind of guy.
Not always. That's what was a surprise. So I don't know if it was I don't know. He just told me he knew and to never talk about it again. So.
Well, you just did on the Mentors for Military podcast.
Oh, yeah. No, that's 15 years ago, man.
Sorry, sir, whoever you may be.
Yeah.
He's probably retired now, sitting out in Palm Beach, Florida, chilling or whatever anyway.
Yeah, he is. We actually, we butted heads. There was never any secret about that. But he also, he hated the way we went about things because of what we learned on Haifa Street. We were kind of, not unorthodox, I want to take it that, but we took the lessons learned in the TTPs from there, which may not have been traditional, conventional, as him being an armor guy his entire career. So we always disapproved of the ways we wanted to go about things. But 9 out of 10 times he would do it your way, do it your way. And most of the time it was right. And if we weren't, then he would yell at me. But there was just some other stuff that happened where no one left on good terms after that. But we had a good conversation right after the book came out. And ironically, me and his wife were friends on Facebook. She was like friends with everybody, and everybody hated him. And then she reached out to me one day and she said, you two need to talk and get this all behind you. And we had a great 2-hour conversation. And
that's awesome.
Doesn't change some of the things that he did or said back then, but doesn't change some of the things I did or said.
Yeah, but you have a point where now you can move forward.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah.
Right.
Not hold on to that crap from before.
Yeah. So did you get tanker boots when you came back?
No, I was really disappointed. Like, everybody.
I would have totally got you tanker boots.
Yeah.
I'd have went down.
They were supposed to, because I'm like, I even told the guys, I'm like, hey guys, when I change command, normally you take the guide on and you give it to the commander. I'm like, that guide on goes with first sergeant.
Yeah.
He's been around longer. Don't even think about giving me that. All I want is a pair of tanker boots so I can talk shit the rest of my life.
And nobody ever gave it.
They never did. Yeah.
You could have got the straps with the buckles and everything. I hated the damn boots, by the way. I was an armor, and I hated those stupid boots. I thought they were ridiculous. But
I always thought they looked like Velcro shoes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they did.
Tanker can't tie his shoes, so he's got to have Velcro, that kind of thing.
That's probably true.
Yeah, my favorite boots, actually, back in the day, wore black boots, was German boots. And when you got if it wasn't for the jungles, of course, I love jungles, but my second favorite pair were German boots, because when you were over there in the cold and everything, those things kept your feet warm.
Yeah.
But they looked a hell of a lot better because they were bulkier and everything and such. But the tanker boots, it was just like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought, no offense for those guys that like wearing their tanker boots from back in the days. It's just not for me.
Yeah, I just thought it would have been a great. Well, I wanted to bring the casing home, but of course you can't.
You can't do that.
Yeah, I was like, what a great cigar! Like, talk about a conversation starter. So when I couldn't do that, and I'm like, that's not one like a.
But somehow must be. I've seen casings before. You're not supposed to have them, but I don't know how they got them. But
it's always a way. Joe is a resourceful little.
Yeah, he is.
Little bastard.
Joe will get some stuff home.
Yeah.
Joe will get some stuff home.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, there's just again back to like kind of the whole. About this conversation, like there's so many things that happen that you can't put in the book. Not that you can't, there's just not enough space. Stuff gets cut out. Heck, the first edit, I tried to call out like every person that I ever served with, friend, and like the first thing the editor came back with, Jeff, I took out 250 names. You made it so damn confusing to follow by trying to acknowledge everybody, and I get why you're doing it, but we got to take that stuff out. So yeah, there's just, again, so many other, there's the one thing we were texting about that, I don't know. I don't want to bring it up and be vague because then it sounds like, but just wild stuff. You know, our boy did with them, but just no conversations and the talk of kind of how, hey, we got this idea, we can maybe work together. So anyhow,
Yeah. So did you still stay in contact with that first sergeant you talk about? Because I think at one time frame we were talking about bringing him on here.
Yeah, we still need to do that to get him on one time. Look, he was one of the best men at my wedding. You know, me, him, two of my old squad leaders had this hilarious ongoing text message thread for years now, and just some of the crap that gets brought up is hilarious. So we have this running joke. One of the guys, he actually lives pretty close to me now. One of my old squad leaders, and he moved on to be a platoon sergeant of a different platoon. But he lives a couple hours from me, and he's real into bowling now, and he's in these bowling leagues. And he wants to know if Legion 8 or if I can, sponsor him and get him some cool swag. And so I'm like, yeah, as long as I get to put your name on the back of whatever jersey you wear, that's the deal. I'll pay for it. And so the guys had this joke. They always called me. And this is, again, go back to 2007. It was the shocker was really funny and cool, and everybody was doing it. So, in the company garrison around just our people, no one ever called me Sir Legion 6. It was always Shocker 6 is how they called me. And so, so I told my boy that, like, you got to put Shocker 6 and explain that to everybody on your bowling jersey. But man, he's just awesome, man. He's just what a man. I mean, like, if the best way to sum it up is I tell every, like, he would go to a lot of the Legion 8 events with me, and I'd look everybody in the room and I'm like, if you ever have your son or daughter go into the military, you want a person that cares this much to be responsible for them and to show them how things should be done. He's hard as hell, man. That guy.
How long did he end up staying in? Beyond
23, 25,
okay.
Maybe. Yeah, he was in, got out for a while, then he came back, and he's one, like, he went through Ranger School at 40.
Oh,
and,
wow. Okay.
Yeah. And at there in the mountain phase, and I'm probably stealing his thunder while you wanted to get him on. I think I texted you this one night. Like, he got stung on the tip of his dick by a bee in mountain phase, and, like, still finished everything. So he's incredible.
Definitely got to get him on to hear about that story.
I'd net out at that point.
I've heard all kinds of different things, but
yeah, he is a piece of work, man. But the men just worshipped him, and so that's why when I mentioned that earlier about the guidon, that's not like me trying to be some humble officer. Like, that is anybody with a pulse or any bit of common sense looked around, like, what made it so special was, it was a lot of things and it was a lot of people, but the core of that was all Orlando.
Very, very cool. And it's always good when you have someone like that that's a really strong leader that knows how to build teamwork and everything else, that then you guys go on and you build this relationship while you're on active duty and you transition out and you're able to still stay in contact and live close enough with them. But because that seems to be one of the rare things. People make a transition and then they don't, end up hanging out or connecting with, some of the former guys that they served with. I don't know. Do you stay in contact with quite a few of them today?
I am in somewhat contact with a couple guys. I'm really close with one of my soldiers who, I kind of brought up. And then I know I have a phone call away to my first senior scout that I ever had that was the Alpha section leader that was in my platoon. We haven't talked much lately, but I mean, I can reach out at any time. And if I needed something, he'd be readily available. And it's one of those things where you kind of grow apart, but you don't forget each other, and you know that they're there. And also, one of our fisters that was in my platoon, we deployed. I could call him right now, and he would. But I mean, what you have with that ongoing text message thing, that's got to be therapeutic.
Oh, it's great. I mean, there's serious stuff, and then we got some with some of the other guys I was platoon leaders with and XOs. There's like all these different ones, and most of the time it's just I always laugh. I tell the guys, like, I'm one of those dorks who carries two phones, and I have a work phone
And a personal.
Yes, and the reason I have a personal phone is because of all the crap that you guys send me that I don't want Big Brother looking at on my company phone and get me fired. So most of it's funny, but stuff comes up every now and then, and it's just talk, or it leads to a phone call, and man, it's. I think I may have mentioned, like, he almost passed from COVID, like, early on.
Oh, you didn't mention that.
Oh, man, he was, like, one of the few, like, full, respirator for a week.
Like went on a vent?
Yeah, on a ventilator for a week. And I mean, they were basically told us like he's not going to make it. But of course, that tough son of a bitch, man. He, but yeah, man, he's just an amazing, amazing guy.
What's going on now with you? I know you're doing the speeches and stuff like that still, but what's the next step? You're going to write a different book? I mean, you did a pretty damn good job on the first one. So have you thought about doing something a little different or?
Lauren did a really good job. To clarify that. I mean, I went in and added my piece to it, but 95, and that would be probably a conservative number, were her words. I think I may have so people are always, and maybe it's just a talking point. People are always like, so I always want to know, what's it like? What is the process of writing a book? And Lauren and I had a really cool one where I went and just spent a day with her, and we knew each other a little bit. She knew about the story. She had done a blog on Legion 8, but we literally just went to a coffee shop for 4 hours in the morning, stopped, went and had lunch, then went to a different coffee shop in the afternoon. And I just talked the whole day, from here's me as a kid. And so she took that conversation and went back to what she felt would be a good framework for the book. So she came back with 12 or 13 different, call it chapters. And then we would set up once a month, every couple of weeks, based off how long it took her to write it. Then we would go through and I would just talk, and she would record that specific period. And that's where we would get into more detail of that piece. And then those conversations, she would push me or challenge me, I think you're holding something back. What else is there? Did you forget anything? Which I would go home and start thinking about stuff. Things would come back and, get a beer or two from me, get sappy, remind something. And so that's kind of how we went through the whole process. And then when it's all said and done, you kind of got to put it together. And what was cool about it is you mentioned how the ending kind of ties everything together.
Yeah.
Everything, we met in person, everything was over the phone except for the last thing. And I just remember telling her, I'm like, Lauren, you're a much better writer than I am, but I probably could have written everything up to this point because it's kind of stating events that happen. Now where I need help is, and again, she did 100 times better job than I could have stating those facts. But I'm I need help, how to tie this all together. And so that's why she was so hell bent on the name, because she had just gone and wrote all that and just tied it into Together We Will Rise. And I just remember reading it and just being in tears, man, about this is everything that I was trying to encapsulate. And she did it, primarily in that one chapter. And so for another book, ironically, I was just talking to her a couple of weeks ago, and I wonder how much you two have been talking, because
not at all.
The last thing out of her mouth, she's like, so when are you going to do book number 2? And
yeah.
It's a logical thought. It's funny. So she lives in Turkey now, and she's doing very well as an author, but she's also doing very well in business.
Yeah, she's in helping other businesses grow or something like that, right?
Yeah. Very, very talented woman. And so one of the things that there's a gap over there is in Europe, that is this is according to her. She's like, that's where I think maybe there's an opportunity for you and some others, but they need more people with a military background writing leadership books. I was like, wow, if you walk into any Barnes & Noble in America, you will see 250.
You'll trip over 13 of them.
Yes, that's all there are. So that was why, that's a logical next step, would to do something like that. I just think the market's so saturated that what would you, without trying to be too different to make a point. But then I'm somewhat being a hypocrite again, because I always say, when I give talks or when we talk about stuff in here, nothing I say is unique. There is nothing that I have ever said in a speech or, a podcast or writing the book that hasn't been said before in some other manner. The difference is sometimes, as we know, people connect differently with different voices and different stories. And so, maybe if I did write a leadership book like that, it might resonate with, this person that, not with that person. So it's on the table, but work keeps me busy, 4 kids. I got one that's a junior in high school, and I got one that's about to be 8 in July, another one that turns 5 in 10 days. And then my little girl, she turns 4 next month. So between dentist, soccer, dance, gymnastics now, Ninja Zone.
So has the eldest read the book yet?
Yes, he has.
What do you think?
It was, so he's a great kid. And this is not just dad saying, like, he's 16, he's willing to games, makes, all A's, just a great kid. But kind of quiet, like keeps his emotions, kind of like his old man, not wanting to express it. I know it was hard on him. Not as much the combat stuff. Like he basically had to read about
your reaction to the stuff that happened.
No, I think he had to, he knew about it, and he's old enough to understand it. My ex and I get along great. It's as good as a situation as, co-parenting can be. But still, like, he was 15 when he read it. A 15-year-old had to read about his mom and dad meeting, falling in love, and then falling out of love and getting divorced. That was tough on him. But, and I told him that beforehand. The other stuff, there was stuff that he knew some of the stuff I went through, but not all of it. So he admitted that was hard. And I said, "Are you glad you did it?" And he said, "I'm really glad I did it." And, I don't really, I know sometimes I try to put myself in his shoes. Like part of his teenagers were like, "Cool, I can go tell my friends my dad did all this crazy stuff." But at the end of the day, he had to read about that stuff with me and his mom. So I know that was hard, but sometimes the hard thing to do is the right thing to do. And, he was going to find out about it. He already knew about most of it anyways, but,
right.
He's going to have to deal with it at some point. So, we let it be his choice. My ex and I talked about it. It wasn't, me, when you think he's ready, because she had read it as well. So, yeah.
I think I may have asked you that question, or we talked about it offline, and I can't remember which it was. But so I wanted to bring that up again. I mean, because there's also something within that you just talked about, which is, a lot of people when they civilians when they meet military personnel, especially within the private sector, they automatically hear, "Oh, you went to combat. Oh, okay. Did you kill somebody?" There's this normal pattern of conversation that then ends up, you know what I'm talking about, that ends up coming out. So, I was listening to you and hearing what you were describing initially about, there are things he knew about you, but yet it's also hard sometimes for people to read a book that gets into such great detail, put you into that character, that person, your life, experience and such, that is foreign. It's not something that they're used to. And I think in a way there is a lesson there, because there shouldn't be an us and them. They're civilians and military, right. I'm talking about, or veterans. And, we could bridge that divide a whole lot better. But I think also there's, within that there are life lessons, leadership lessons. There's the reality of how a person lives their life and the struggles they go through either in or out of the military. And that's something that you can gain, period.
Yeah. I mean, and again, we touched on this before. The whole goal is like, if we're going to do this, I want it to be raw. I want to talk, in many ways, things that don't paint me in a good light. The stuff that always, as Lawrence is like, what do you want this to be about? And it's like, I don't want, the veteran with his grunt style T-shirt, to be the only audience that and I'm not knocking that. I'm just painting a picture. Let me clarify that. I also want the message, to resonate with, the suburban housewife, on the beach and vacation in Destin, reading the book. And I thought we'd do that just by being raw and being vulnerable and opening up those things that, you're right, there is no us versus them. Like, a lot of the stuff we talk about, like meeting someone, falling in love. Yeah, that happened, and falling out of love, over deployments, but it happens in everyday life as well. It's the same things that everybody goes through. And, so what's weird about it is, like, there was nothing, like, I guess maybe net new that came out of the book. Maybe it was just having it all together. And there was everything in the book I had talked about with somebody before. I had never talked with one person about everything. And so it was a really weird thing, like my mom reading the book, my wife reading the book, and finding out stuff about me that they didn't know, and how someone, obviously, Lauren and I became friends through the process, but there was just this weird stretch of I've poured everything good and bad in this person that I've known for a year. So, But I think, and again, back to what's the lesson learned? My kids always hate it. I'm always just like, what's the lesson learned of this? And the lesson learned is like, not everyone has to write a book. Not everyone has to give speeches. And I say this when I do talk, and I'm like, but if you keep this stuff, if we can get into it, I think why people have problems, but like the more we keep stuff like pin up inside us all the time, again, I use the shadow analogy, the more we want to act like it didn't happen. It's easy to just forget that period of our life. Well, it doesn't have to be combat. It could be a traumatic childhood. It could be marriage, divorce, bad job. There's all kind of things. And the natural response is, I just want to put that behind me. But, you have to come to terms with that in some way. And, not only I think if you keep it pinned up inside of you, it just digs its claws into you even more and makes it that much harder to deal with. But once but the term embrace doesn't mean like, hell yeah, I went through shit. I don't mean it like that. It's like just embrace the experience, that it's a part of who you are. And it's never going away. And like, it's liberating once you accept that and make that choice. And then I also think in doing that, and again, tying it full circle back to the book, opening up to lore and open up speeches, whatever. Everybody, I always say, everybody goes through shit. Everybody has a story, but we always seem to want to like categorize, well, what I went through is nothing compared to what you went through, and so on and so forth. But I always say, like, you never know when what you've been through and what you have to say is exactly what someone else needs to hear. But if you're too busy dealing with it pin up inside of you, then you're going to miss every opportunity put in front of you for the rest of your life to help make a positive impact in the life of someone else. So again, not write a book, not, do whatever. Just don't be afraid to share and to be vulnerable.
Yeah. No, that's a great, that ending right there is a great takeaway, because I feel like, even within the private sector, or when you end up transitioning, it doesn't have to be, again, these horrific and challenging experiences. In that way, it could just be a life lesson that you lived, that you're passing on, that you're being vulnerable and sharing a story of it that happened to your own personal life. That, hey, I just want to give you, comfort in knowing you can make a wrong decision here, but you're young enough that you can recover. It's not the end of the world. You're going to sit there and try to make a life decision and determine, should I go this way or that way in a career path? It doesn't really matter, because there's nothing to say that the one that you're going to choose is going to be the right one, even if you do make that decision. You're just never going to know those unknowns. But if you can actually, like you said, pour your heart out, share your own personal stories. And that's what I wondered if, when your son was reading the book, if that's some of the things he took away too, is like, maybe I don't understand. This gave me an idea of understanding a little bit more. Like in the case of my own father and stuff, there was stuff I didn't realize in his childhood that I learned about a little bit later. But then even also understanding through studying family generations even prior, there was a pattern that also took place. Yeah. So, sometimes these stories, there's deeper things, there's stuff that's going on that when you start pulling back the veil, you get to understand a little bit more. And I mean, we talked about this, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago when you came on the podcast as a guest.
Oh, it was a way to memorialize my experience and me not have to tell the story to, 800 times to 800 people. Right. I could tell it one time. And like, if you want to learn something, just, if you're ever wondering, episode, I forget what it is.
I'm not the only one.
So whatever.
I'm vindicated.
What I'm impressed by is when people come on here and they go, I was on episode 187. I'm like, what? You remember that? Yeah. That, maybe they looked it up before they came in. I don't know, but
we should get a list just to keep with the stuff.
But no, you're right. I think but sometimes even it could be as simple as you don't have to be on a podcast. You don't have to have wrote a book. It's just more of being vulnerable, open yourself up. And sometimes those things can be very impactful to the person on the other end of that communication.
Yeah, and I think that, and just again, I touched on the power of mindset and just keeping a positive mindset. And surrounding yourself around like-minded, positive people. Like, we all like. There's, I got a great job. I won't say this company. I won't say it's my last company. I'll just say I have worked. The type. Like, they're always bitching about something. It's always negative. And guess what? The same group of people seem to gravitate to that, and they have their own little bitch fest over here. Then you have the like overly kumbaya people over here. It's just fake. They're just trying to say it so they get a good review. But just like find like-minded people that are positive, but also don't be afraid to have, we kind of texting back and forth on, why is it so hard to let go of things and change things? Like sometimes you know what you know, and it's hard to open your mind and actually take the time to think about where the other person's coming from. It's easier to gravitate towards like-minded people. So there's a balance there between, like what I'm saying is surround yourself around positive people, but don't be afraid to understand where the other side's coming from.
Take the time to learn.
Yeah. Because you never know. Like, I mean, sometimes, like I listen to all views on everything because I don't want to be one of those persons that's indoctrinated because I watch this same channel every night and everything they say is true. And that works for both sides. Yeah. Just like I may disagree with it, but how can I go and encourage my kids to learn, challenge themselves, push themselves if I'm not going to continue to do the same thing at 48?
Yeah.
And it's frustrating as hell sometimes, but you got to set the example, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Definitely. Man, I appreciate you coming all this way. You had a very difficult day.
Just an arduous journey to get here.
Yeah.
4 a.m. wake up and I got stuck in a middle seat because of you from after the nice up in the front of the plane that I was initially supposed to be on.
Yeah, you had a terrible day, man.
Seat, but no, I'm kidding, man.
I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we got a chance to connect once again. I'm glad this time we kept it a little bit lighter, but we also got deep in some areas But I think there's some valuable lessons here as well throughout. Tons of different stuff that you dropped along the way, especially here in the last couple of minutes of the episode and stuff. But anyway, I appreciate you coming back.
Can I sign off as Red to Lima?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I mean, again, I'm just a huge fan of what you guys are doing here and humbled, that you thought enough to have me back on and appreciate the audience, all the other guests that come on. I love doing it. I've been able to connect with a few of them as well. So don't ever stop what you're doing.
Yeah. So is this the Red to Lima out?
Red to Lima out.